Welcome to Paranormal M, where the supernatural is always within reach. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest eerie tales. Prepare yourself for an unforgettable experience. My first paranormal activity was when I was 6. I was always afraid of ghosts, but I liked the thrill of something I can't see. For as long as I can remember, whenever I had a nightmare, it was ghosts or demons. I never really watch any scary movies because I'm too scared, even as an adult. Anyway, I used to have a television in my room. Sometimes in the middle of the night, it would open full volume on a TV static screen. I had a bunk bed at the time and slept on the top. I remember clearly covering my ears and crying for my mom for her to come and close the TV because I was too scared to do it myself. It happened a couple of times over a few months. My mom thought it was me just doing it for attention. She would come angrily and deplug the television. The last time it happened, my mom yelled that she was not coming. After a few minutes of crying, I went down the ladder and pulled the plug myself. I swear the television didn't go off. It took like 10 or 15 seconds of me looking at the plug in my hand to the television still full volume. Finally turned off and I was so scared. The next day I told my mom I didn't want to have a TV in my room anymore. I never got one again in my bedroom. First time seeing ghosts of Glamis Castle. One of my favorite ghost encounters of all time. It was at Glamis Castle in Scotland. It's said to be one of the most haunted castles in all of Scotland. I was traveling with a friend at the time and she was afraid of ghosts. Told me to not tell her if I see any for our whole trip. The tour starts with the guide opening the door to this sort of dining area. I saw a beautiful lady dressed in older clothing. She was like a white translucent. She looked up and when she saw the group left the room to the left right through the wall. I immediately looked around, but nobody else in our group was reacting. No one was even surprised or even curious. Thought it was a hologram before I saw no reaction. I was even more curious because where that ghost disappeared, it was just a wall. I was listening to the guide and just waiting for the right opportunity to ask a question. Finally, I could ask the guide. This area, pointed to an invisible rectangular door in the wall, was there something here before? He seemed surprised, but said, there used to be a door there. It was where the servants would pass to get the food from the kitchen. I was actually choked. I didn't expect that answer. My friend was curious, but didn't ask anything for fear of the reply, maybe. We continue on the tour, and the guide mentions a little boy ghost tripping people over. Didn't see him. When we go into the chapel, and I sat first row, the guide then says that there's a ghost that sometimes haunts the chapel. Usually sits in the back right corner. No one in our group sat even close to that corner. Is it a coincidence? Maybe. I didn't see her. Then we moved to another room. Looks like a library. There's a pool table, but what struck me was the man on the other side of the room. He was dressed more recent clothing, like slightly translucent. He was smoking. Like smoking inside a castle. He was sort of amused by us. And again, no one was reacting to the smoker. Started to watch what other people were doing, and within a range of 3 meters, and not one approached him. I was trying not to look at him too much because I didn't want him to know that I could see him. I was fascinated by how he was reacting to us. At some point, I thought I was going crazy, so I asked my friend if she could also smell cigars. She said yes, and the guide overheard me and said this used to be the men's room. That's where they would go after supper to just smoke, play, and drink. It's not been used in well over a decade now. It's weird, I never smelled cigars before. Clearly, that ghost did not see the non-smoking poster. But anyway, I was so relieved that other people could also smell it. It just reinforced really what I was seeing. So that was my experience, and to this day, it's still my favorite. After I meet a ghost, I always wonder, like, what if I said this, or what if I did that? But I'm always too scared in the moment. Maybe one day. What did I see? When I was pregnant with my first son, I had seen something. My husband is a gamer, frequently plays games very late. I enjoy my sleep, so I always get to bed much earlier than him, let's just say. A very light sleeper, and usually I'll wake up when he comes to bed. Well, one of these nights in my third trimester, I was woken up to someone hovering over me. I assumed it was my husband, and sort of in irritation, I asked him what he was looking for. No response. I asked him again, thinking he didn't hear me. Still got no response. Super annoyed, I opened my eyes and asked even more annoyed and louder what he was doing so I could go back to sleep. Whatever I was looking at looked like my husband, but a few seconds after I asked, I heard my husband snoring next to me. Without taking my eyes off who or what I was looking at, I took my hand in search for my husband, thinking maybe I was just hearing things. I felt my husband sleeping right next to me. Looked over to see if he was there, and he was. I looked back at the figure standing over me, and it still looked like my husband, but then just slowly disappeared. What was that experience? Luminous ghost. When I was a child, I witnessed a spectral apparition. My mother and I saw exactly the same thing in the same place. I didn't see that thing right away. I only saw her when my mother asked me to get out of the bed. It's because we were in bunk beds made of wood. At that time, we lived in Chaumont, which is in France. I was living in hell. My mother had left my father because he used to beat her. I was the scapegoat of my school, and the neighbors of the apartment above ours frequently prevented us from sleeping at night by throwing dishes in the bath and hitting furniture and hitting the walls, shouting loudly in their orgasms, making invocations and all that. I was sleeping soundly that night until my mother started talking loudly to wake me up, to tell me that there was some kind of demon that appeared to her. At first, as I was afraid, I refused to join her. It was because I really needed to sleep. Then I just gave in. I went to the ladder on all fours. I noticed that a blue light was reflected from the ceiling, or more generally throughout the room, while I knew full well that we had turned everything off. I also noticed that the neighbors in question were practicing strong enough invocations to make us hear. Practicing strong enough invocations. As I went down the ladder, I struggled with the temptation to turn my head to the right to see where all that blue light was coming from. Then it was only after joining my mother in her bed and after several requests from her that I ended up looking at this thing face to face. The ghost was a half-skeletal corpse. It was lighting up the room with its blue light. It had the features of my maternal grandfather. The ghost talked to us. We were too afraid to pay attention to its words. This thing has finally vanished. Needless to say, when this thing disappeared, we were in complete darkness. At the time of his disappearance, the neighbors stopped speaking. We heard them running and opening the door to the apartment. Then we heard them run down the stairs as if they were fleeing something that was chasing them. We could hear the squeal of their feet, or maybe shoes, at every turn they took. Then they were heard leaving the building by slamming the main door. Shared experience with the dog. The thing that makes this experience a little bit different was that me and his dog both saw it apparently, but I was sitting on the couch facing his kitchen. Not only his kitchen, but his office and the hallway to the left. His dog was sitting next to me, staring towards the hallway. I knew my best friend's dad was in the office area, and I could see him on his computer. I knew my best friend's brother was in his room. My best friend was in the bathroom. No one else was here at the time. Well, something extremely pale, like they had, albinoism. It peeked at the dog and me around a corner in the hallway. Before I could wonder what I was looking at, his dog growled and it ducked left out of view. I looked over at the dog and back, and it was completely gone. Not even 10 seconds after that, my best friend came out of the bathroom and I heard the door open. Wasn't enough time for his brother to make his way back to his bedroom and not be seen in the hallway. The only door I heard open in that time was the bathroom door, and my best friend came out, and I asked my best friend if his brother was out there, and he said no. The entire viewing lasted maybe 4 seconds. I've had a lot of strange experiences at my best friend's house, but this is the first time I saw something while somebody else did. His dog isn't much of a growler. If somebody that she knew at least was peeking at her from a corner, she'd be more likely to want to play than to growl. It was just really odd. I don't think I've seen that thing or person before. My cat versus the Hat Man. This just happened, so of course I have to come share it with my besties. So coincidentally or not, up to you guys, the last time I saw the Hat Man was during a sleep paralysis episode, and my cat saved me. My cat saved me by just throwing himself in my door and waking me up. This time I was awake, standing by the time I noticed him, and my cat was banging on the door again. It's my belief that the Hat Man visits during bad times. I don't think he's an omen of death. Well, my house isn't exactly glowing with positive vibes right now. My boyfriend who lives with me is experiencing a psychotic episode recovering from alcoholism. He was cut off by his entire family for about a month. Anyways, I was on my side, awake, but starting to get a bit sleepy. My cat started knocking on my door. I groaned, got up, and I was walking to the door, literally like 8 steps, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye peeking out of my closet. It was moving back and forth rapidly. My closet door broke, so I have 2 curtains sort of hanging to cover it. It doesn't quite do the job because the curtains aren't wide enough, so there's a foot gap where I can see into the closet on one end. Anyways, I didn't get a good look at it right then, but it scared me anyways, so I hustled the 3 remaining steps and opened my door. My cat came running in and I got back into bed. We hopped up onto the corner of the bed, and I was lying or standing on my bed, and I could also see the sort of closet while I looked at him. I looked up directly at the closet and I saw the shadow or figure of a wide-brimmed hat ducking in and out quickly. What's weird is that he was very short, like maybe 4 feet tall. He wouldn't have been able to see into the mirror above my dresser. He would have had to climb my bed. And the shadow didn't move inhumanly fast, but it or he was doing a very poor job at trying not to be seen while staring at me and my cat. And at the same time, I saw the shadow of my cat's tail, which in retrospect was a different color than the Hat Man's shadow. Its tail was high and flicking around. I saw them at the same time in its separate shadows. I didn't immediately assume, oh my god, demons, oh my god, Hat Man. But I was like, oh, my cat's tail. Then I realized I was seeing something move in and out around the curtain before I even left my cat in. So I got scared, yelled at my Alexa to turn the lights on, and it was gone. Afterwards, my cat fell asleep pretty quickly. He was out cold. I pet him and he didn't stir and lift his head. A bit later, he woke up with a jolt and lifted his head, and his ears were very pointy like he was scared or very alert. I guess if it was that scary, he would have ran. Probably just a coincidence. But still weird considering the hour me and my cat have had. puff of white odorless smoke appeared in front of my daughter. Puff of odorless white smoke appeared in front of my daughter. I, a 37-year-old male, was having a conversation about my daughter. She's 12. Going to school this evening, and that's when suddenly a puff or stream of incense of smoke seemed to grow from the surface of her kitchen table. It rose to about eye level of my daughter. That was before quickly disappearing as if she inhaled it, saying it tasted slightly of ash. She's never consumed ash, so maybe more of a loose description of what she thinks it would taste like. There were 4 of us, including my sons, a 20-year-old male and a 16-year-old male, and also sitting in the vicinity and engaged in the conversation. After it happened, at least 5 seconds of conversation went by before any of us acknowledged what the hell just happened. I immediately started looking for a source of fire or anything that could explain, because something had to be responsible for it. Now, another detail that I'm reluctant to mention, because we're not a religious home. My daughter is wearing a necklace with a crucifix on it. It arrived from Temu this afternoon. That necklace snapped at the clasp maybe a minute prior to this event. We never would have thought anything of it being a cheap piece of costume jewelry, but just a weird cherry on top. We're not scared, we're just confused. But we all saw it. Perfect clarity. My wife was the only one who didn't, and at this point, she's just annoyed that we all seem to be losing our minds. There's an excitement and a fear lingering. What do you think? Appalachian Shadow Creature. I'm not sure if this is the right place to post this, but I'd like to know if anybody has seen something similar. Around 2 years ago, one of my friends was moving from Appalachia region to Florida in a few days. We decided to go catfishing before we left. We didn't catch anything that night on the river. We left around 2 or 3 a.m. On the drive back, we hit a fog. I remember the window was cracked because I was smoking a stogie. A friend was half asleep in the passenger seat, but still conscious. I just looked up from changing the song on my phone, and right in front of the car was what I can only describe as a shadow being. It was tall and stood on 2 legs. It had no color or details, just a black void in the shape of an upright silhouette. It was right in front of my headlight, too. It still didn't show any detail. The thing about this whole experience that terrified me the most was after it had passed us, it smacked the weeds and tall grass on the side of the road, and it made such a loud sound. It's because of how fast it was moving. Hearing that noise after what I just saw sent a chill down my spine. My friend and I didn't say much except to confirm to ourselves that we had indeed saw what we had just seen. An Appalachian Shadow Man. I've never seen something like that before or since. Please comment if somebody has seen something like this. It'd be interesting to get more insight on what I saw that night. Experience with mimics before or after moving houses twice. My partner and I have been hiding the fact that we're hearing each other calling a very specific thing like we're lost, but in a loving tone, or whistling a specific tune that we use to find each other when we're lost from each other. We're hearing it coming from the same area, the living room, which has a door directly to our bedroom, a very small flat. My partner came to me today after work and calmly asked me if I'd returned from the shower, mid-shower to only go back to the shower. I was early this morning calling and whistling for him. He said he called and whistled back, but because nothing else ensued, he dismissed it and went back to sleep. When he lay next to me in bed and asleep, I hear him lovingly calling me the next room, excited to show me something. There's a separate instance, longer and a different story, about being at a church at 2 a.m. alone together in a kitchen cooking and literally back-to-back hearing a whistle in the back of the church. There's a few other smaller instances, but I've also heard giggling in this room as well as coughing. I don't like this room one bit, blessed it with holy water upon arrival. I don't know why this is happening, but I know that he hears it too. I don't feel comfortable explaining my mental illness here, but for mental illness reasons, like diagnosed if that matters, I have auditory and visual hallucinations. That's when I'm at my most unstable. And I've been extremely stressed, so I've been chopping up everything I've heard to just nothing but myself, But knowing he's scared and concerned, I feel compelled to investigate. Stupid, of course. But I guess I can set up a camera. I grew up a raised Wiccan and thought I had a gift to hear and see the other side, only to be diagnosed as an adult and no longer practice. I don't wish to get in, any route I would have then, but now I'm asking if this has always been with me. Spooky radio in the wee small hours. Some years ago, my wife and I bought a semi-detached bungalow. It was like a fixer-upper, you could say. It hadn't sold for a couple of years as there was an eccentric old man in the adjoining bungalow who was really strange. This didn't bother us as we pretty much resolved to just ignore him. We knew he was seriously ill and that he was unlikely to survive for more than 1 or 2 more years. He had owned the bungalow that we had bought, but it had been through a number of owners. But he resented the fact that we lived there and hated us making any alterations. He would seek revenge. We'd do this by putting a radio against our bedroom wall and playing loud opera music at 3 a.m. We said nothing about this. Eventually he died and were left in peace. The bungalow was sold to a young couple with a family who didn't move in immediately as the place didn't have, means and water and a few other necessities of life. The couple were handed the keys and started to move building material inside for, a modernization project. 2 days later, my wife and I were in bed and we heard the, operatic music coming through the wall again. And this happened, hasn't happened in 18 months that the property had been empty. Went to see the new owner a day afterward and asked him if he had a radio that he had left in overnight, maybe. Well, yeah, they have a radio, but it was turned to Radio 1, which is modern music, and more disturbingly, it wasn't even plugged into the socket. Had the spirit of my ex-neighbor returned to haunt us? Sometimes is a light in our darkness. Destiny has a way of finding us all, no matter how deeply we try to hide from it. Never thought much of my life. Typical. But there's an undercurrent, a ripple beneath the surface, hints at something far from normal. These things that happened, I'd rather not call them events. That would imply something temporary, something explainable. These were not things one could simply explain or brush aside. They were more like warnings, or worse, invitations. My name? Well, it doesn't matter. Not right now. I'm 27, but what you need to know is that this story, my story, begins long before. When I was young, when the world still made sense, or maybe it never did. The first time I noticed something was off, I was 9. I was in the garden with my grandmother an ordinary day. I had a ball, like a cheap plastic one with Spider-Man painted on it. I remember the way it felt light in my hands, the sensation of air against my face as I tossed it up straight into the sky. I don't know why I did it, why anybody does things at that age. It was just a game, or so I thought. But the ball never came back. First I waited. It seemed like I was taking longer than it should, like it had been caught by the wind or maybe hung up in branches of some unseen tree. But the sky was clear, impossibly clear. No clouds, no branches, just endless blue. And then nothing. I remember staring at my neck, craning, like waiting for a distant flicker, a sign of red and blue plastic tumbling down. But it didn't. It was like the ball had been swallowed by the sky, devoured by some unseen maw beyond my understanding. I stood there, motionless. My grandmother, well, she didn't even notice. She carried on as if nothing had happened, calling me inside for tea. Couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That something was watching. The second incident came a few years later when I was 12. I was living with my stepfather by then. We didn't really get along. I don't think we ever did, though. He was shouting again that day over something trivial, something I can't even remember. What I do remember is the feeling, the heat, the anger. I could feel my skin prickling, the air itself tightening around me like a noose. It was summer, bright, cloudless, a normal afternoon. Until it just wasn't. I don't know what set it off. I just know that one second he was screaming, the next the sky turned black. Not the gradual dimming of a storm approaching, but instant darkness, like a switch had been flipped. The sun, once glaring, vanished behind clouds that had been there a moment before. There had been nothing before. Then the thunder, deafening, shaking the very walls. I could see the panic in his eyes, the confusion. But I didn't feel fear. I felt something else, something I still can't put into words. It was as if the storm was mine, as if I had called it. And when the lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the terror in his face. The third time was different. I was older, maybe 17, and I was on a bus. A bus I had never ridden before. Everything felt strange that day, as if the world was slightly out of sync, like a poorly tuned radio just shy of the right station. People around me, their faces blurred, their voices distant, as if they weren't real at the same time, they were mere suggestions of people. Shadows. I sat at the back staring out the window, lost in my own thoughts. That's when I saw it, or rather saw him, me. I wasn't looking at my reflection. This was more than that. I saw myself sitting a few seats ahead, same clothes, same face. But it wasn't a mirror. It was me in the flesh, moving, breathing, existing. I wanted to get up to walk over and confront him or confront myself, but something held me back. A coldness in my gut, a warning whisper at the edge of my mind telling me, do not engage. I watched, frozen, as if this other me sat there staring ahead as if nothing was wrong, as if he didn't know I was there. But I knew this wasn't right. My heart raced, my breath quickened. The bus seemed to slow, the world outside crawling at a snail's pace. Then, as suddenly as it began, the bus jerked to a stop. When I looked again, it was gone. Now at 27, I wonder if I'm still waiting for something. Or maybe it's waiting for me. These occurrences, these shifts in reality, they were really only the beginning. And in the coming days, I'll add up more events that happened to me. Strange things in my house. If you've seen some of my old posts or comments, you may know that I'm more of a seeker of a rational explanation for everything. I'm not saying that I don't believe in the paranormal, but I'm pretty much on the contrary. I prefer to first eliminate all natural and rational leads. But I have to admit that for years, strange but explainable events seem to follow me. I've experienced strange things in my old apartments and in my new one. It continues. Some time ago, I was woken up in the middle of the night by a loud noise followed by several small noises. My dog heard it too. When I went to see in the living room where the noise seemed to be coming from, I didn't see anything in particular, but I hadn't turned on the light either, so I noticed that a frame had fallen from the wall. I figured the big noise must be that, but that didn't explain the little ones that followed. These little noises repeated themselves a few times without me knowing where they were coming from. One stormy night, my dog was sleeping with me because he was afraid of storms and had a bowl of water and kibble in the room. My door was closed, so she couldn't go into the living room. When I woke up, I could see that the bowls in the living room had been emptied. Quickly understood that surely the little noises I heard at night were those of a cat entering my house through a small window. Mystery solved. Now, things that I can't explain. Maybe you can. Later, other events occurred. Noises in the walls, for example, which probably come from neighbors, but also the impression that something is passing between my legs, kind of like a cat would. But I don't have a cat. When the windows are open, I put it down to a draft. When they're all closed, I can't explain it. Another strange thing is that my dog is terrified of the basements of the building. She never goes near the stairs and looks at them with fear. She follows me everywhere without any problem, but never the cellars. I tried once to ask her to follow me without forcing her. Simply went down calling her. When we got to the cellars, she was panicking, turning around in all directions and crying. I didn't insist and quickly went back up, especially her. This event comes after a period when a lot of noise we heard in the cellars, like other tenants carried out an investigation, but I was the only one to hear the noises. And what confirms to me that it was not just in my head is that my dog also reacted to the noise. Like several times, like I went down to see something, like sometimes I heard a woman humming, but I never saw anything. I strongly suspect one of the neighbors to have been the source for the noises, because after I talked to her about it, everything stopped. And the latest event to date this week while making my pancakes, the sugar box flew off the cabinet as if it had been pushed. The window right next to it was open, and I thought the wind could have done it, but the violence of the movement made me wonder. Strange experience last night. Me, a 34-year-old male, and my wife, female 32, are holidaying in Turkey. We're staying in a modern hotel. Last night I woke up to what felt like our bed shaking. My wife was asleep and my mind jumped to maybe a small earthquake as I'd experienced one a few years ago in Bali. Checked my phone quickly and the time was 3:03 a.m. I turned my phone screen back off, the room was pitch black, and at the end of the bed I thought I could see the outline of a figure standing still. I flicked the bedside light on and nothing was there, as you'd imagine. I then got up and had to look out the window down the road by the pool area. Still had the thought that maybe there'd been a small earthquake. My wife woke up at this point and asked what I was doing. I said I felt the bed shake and I was looking outside. I didn't mention the figure as I didn't want to freak her out. She rolled over and went back to sleep. I stayed awake for about 20 minutes and then must have fallen asleep again too. This morning when we'd been awake for a while, my wife and I said that she had a crazy dream experience in the night. She wasn't sure if she'd been awake or asleep, but she said she was aware of someone holding both her hands as she lay in bed and could hear what sounded like an older man singing in her ear in Arabic or Turkish. She said she had the feeling that somebody was sat next to her in the bed, but didn't say anything and flicked her bedside light on. This was a little bit weird, as at that point I hadn't mentioned the figure I'd seen. She said that this has happened after she woke up to me looking out the window and I was asleep at this point. So we'll have to have been at least 30 minutes or so later. I feel there are many explanations for all this, but just thought some people may find this interesting. We've been in the hotel room for 4 days and 4 nights so far. 3 more nights left. Something very weird is happening to my grandma's phone. I can't explain. My grandmother passed away on May 6th this year. Long deathbed. We were able to say our goodbyes and promised we'd see each other again. 1 month after she passed, her contact was suddenly changed from grandma to crying, broken heart, crying emoji grandma. Just thought it was some weird glitch and removed it, put it back to just grandma. I don't want to be reminded of her death, those emojis do this. Strange because it only happened to a contact. I rebooted my phone after that, and a few weeks later changed it back to that again. It was the night after I dreamed of her, and she told me that it was time to be okay again. I removed it again and wrote it off. Not sure how long it had been there, so it might not be related. Today I opened my contact list on WhatsApp. It was back again. At this point I'm freaking out. If it was a simple glitch, why only her? Why those specific emojis? Why did this only start after she died? I've never had this problem before. She dies and suddenly it starts, and only with her. Can't find a reasonable explanation for it. Discussed it with family and friends, and they said something might be breaking into my phone, but that's not possible without me noticing because of face recognition in my many pins. The other explanation could be some hacker into my phone, but why? What's the point? They'd steal a whole lot of money, but just choose to put these emojis on the grandma that died? And I'm not a firm believer on the she's trying to communicate, but at this point it's becoming really strange. Too many coincidences. And something else, a few weeks before she died, I taught her how to save a contact on the phone and edit existing contacts. The only thing I taught her about her phone, which adds to the weirdness of it all. And no, somebody on her phone is not changing it. That wouldn't influence how I would have saved her in mine. Craziest paranormal experience that I've had. I've never shared this story with anybody besides my immediate family, but this was by far the weirdest, strangest thing that's happened in my life, and the reason I believe in the supernatural now. Previously, I'd always been somewhat a skeptic. The story sounds so unreal to the point of being bullshit, but it did happen. I won't blame you, though, if you don't believe it. It took place about 2 years ago on a summer night. I was home alone, my entire family was on vacation. The time was exactly 3:33 a.m. I remember vividly looking at my alarm clock. About to head to bed when suddenly my friend Eric, who lives in a city about 20 miles away, calls me in the middle of the night somewhat frantically in a cold sweat. This is extremely abrupt and unlike him. Starts off immediately with, "Dude, I'm sorry if this sounds fucking off the rocker, but I need to let you know I had a terrible dream. I just woke up and that something broke into your house." I didn't think much of it. I was about to call him batshit crazy and hang up on the phone and just go to bed. But then it happened. I heard some slight creaking of floorboards in my kitchen. The exact time this happened, my friend on the line is like, "Yeah, I'm not kidding, it scared me legit, and if I'm not on drugs, whatever it is was in your kitchen." I immediately got the chills because of the timing. But I'm no superhero, I had no weapon, so I was scared shitless just hiding in my room. I almost, felt its presence. You know how if someone's super angry near you or something, you can feel the vibe of rage? Yeah. Hard to explain, but I intuitively felt the energy, the vibe of something in the house, like drawing closer, pacing toward the hallway, even closer, coming toward my room. It was a strong energy. I froze. I was at a loss for words and shitting bricks at this point. Because despite any of this not making any sense, I knew my friend was right. At this point, whatever it was basically right behind my closed door. Felt like I could feel it through the door having a piercing gaze on me. But I knew it wasn't a person. If a person would make noise, I'd be able to see a shadow or shoes at the bottom of the door. There was some non-material, some being without a physical body of sorts. Never encountered this shit in my life. I was waiting to see if I'd open the door, touch the door handle, and for whatever reason it was freezing cold. At this point, I'm just doubling down to face my fears and open the door in one swift motion with a war cry. And then as I did, all went black. I don't remember a single thing. Passed out and woke up in a tiny puddle of drool. I looked up, it was 4:13 a.m. I had been unconscious for 40 minutes. To this day, my friend Eric and I now believe there's more to this world that we simply won't understand. unexplained experience with garden gnomes in my childhood. Mainly because this sounds crazy and isn't your typical ghost sighting type experience, it instead involves garden gnomes. Yep, literal garden gnomes. Interestingly, I totally ignored that this happened around my late 20s. So for years I remembered it, but just thought nothing of it, never questioned it. Which, in and of itself, is weird, because it was a really odd experience. When I finally questioned it again, I was like, why the hell haven't I questioned this in 20 years? It happened when I was 8. I haven't seen my nephews and nieces turn 8. I can see 8-year-olds are very lucid and aware and absolutely don't live in some fantasy delusion, which is what I probably convinced myself of. My parents and I were driving in Cornwall, a part of England steeped in mythology and folklore, the home of the Merlin story and all that. We passed a house, and we passed many times in my childhood. We visited Cornwall every year. An old man lived in this little cottage, and beside it was a statue of a giant gnome's boot. I used to play in it as a kid. This particular time, a table was set out front covered in garden gnomes, as in the little inanimate statues, either for sale or on display. We pulled up and rolled the windows down to take a look. Parents told me to say hi, so I said, "Hi, gnomes." I waved at them. Then they said to say goodbye, so I said, "Bye, gnomes." Waved again, and instantaneously their faces went from their typical mischievous smile and simultaneously all dropped into a frown. In a split second, their faces just dropped before my eyes, as if their smiles turned upside down. I jumped because I was taken aback and told my parents immediately, like a freaked-out tone. Their faces frowned when I said bye. My parents both laughed as we pulled away. My dad explained to me that was a projection, like the Mona Lisa. People see a smile or a frown depending on what they're feeling. I didn't really say anything else. I just sat there silently pondering this. But that doesn't make any sense. I didn't feel happy or sad, and my mood didn't change at all. I know what I saw. And 26 years later, I'm still convinced that I know what I saw. I wasn't some fantastical kid with an overactive imagination. I've never hallucinated in my life. I don't have vision problems or mental illness. And this is totally isolated. I've never had anything like this or anything vaguely unexplainable or paranormal happen to me before or since. I'm not saying it was paranormal, I'm just saying it was completely unexplained. Continues to be until this day. I actually feel pretty embarrassed telling the story because I know how absolutely insane it sounds. Has anybody ever experienced anything similar? Does anybody have any other insights into what could have happened? I'll put a 26-year-old mystery to bed. What's wrong with me? I was then 5 years old or 6. At the time, I lived in a 2-story house with my parents who slept on the first floor and my sisters on the top floor. I was on the first floor with my parents. One evening, while I was just sort of falling asleep peacefully without light, I suddenly woke up. I felt like a huge, great fear, and I was very hot. I was sweating enormously. There was no sound, none of that. I just put myself so my blanket was over my face, leaving just my nose sticking out. I felt like I was being watched at the edge of my bed, as if someone or something was watching me. The evenings passed, and every night I felt the same thing. It lasted about a few minutes before going back to sleep after my big scare. One evening I took my courage during yet another fear, to look at the ground to see if there was something and that I wasn't dreaming. Whatever I saw was large, slightly round shoes facing my bed. Men's shoes, but in any case I felt that they were a man. After seeing these shoes the following nights, I heard the man come to my bed walking. I felt him look at me, then slowly leave. When he left again, I fell asleep immediately. I then asked my parents if they came to see me at night. They told me no, my Mother's a pretty strong believer in the paranormal, unlike my father, who's very philosophical. She experienced things herself, so I talked to her about it a few years later before moving. She advised me to talk to this man, which I couldn't do because of the thrill of fear that it would cause me. After discussing this with an adult, I found myself upside down in my bed, wrapped in my duvet, screaming for my mother to come and save me because I didn't know where I was. My mother was never so afraid. Well, then we moved to a small house with my father and my mother. My room was being near my parents as usual. This reassured me so much, because I was now 12. I then fell asleep the first night in my new room. Everything went well, but I always slept with my light on and my duvet on my face, leaving my nose protruding. One evening I heard someone say my name slowly, like a whisper. Then I immediately hid under my blanket because I was playing my DS in secret. Thought it was my father at first, and I heard him even louder. Read. I was sweating like every other year. Nothing happened after a few years, but I was still so stressed at night. Time passed, and the more things I felt in this house when I was alone, I felt observed. Like as soon as I turned my head, I saw black shadows suddenly disappear. I had a staircase that went up to the small floor of the house. I almost never went up there. Felt something at the top of it. I was going up there to play video games. So I played video games at night because I was so afraid of falling asleep. But I had to sleep one day, so I fell asleep on the bed that was upstairs with the television on to reassure me that I was around like 15 years old. You had the television on to reassure you that you were 15 years old. Interesting. Then I felt the same sensation again, and somebody calling me very loudly. So I woke up and I hadn't slept all night because of fear. I then slept all day. Sometimes I saw things like a very bright light on the wall in front of my bed that I'd taken a photo for my mother when my parents went on a vacation. I no longer have this photo, unfortunately. I approached the light because over time I finally got used to it. The light remained then, and I touched it. It was warm and sort of reassuring. So when I was alone, I would talk to these things. Where are you? Are you okay today? And sometimes at night I felt somebody caressing my back. It was quite disturbing, but in truth it felt very good. And I was playing with my figures a few times, they would jump up from my bed into the floor in front of my eyes. And also I'd found a branch that strangely resembled a tree of life that I'd put in the trash under the advice of a lady who had come to my house who smelled the spirits, read the cards, and you see what? My mom wanted to know more about why I felt all this. This lady then revealed that the spirit of a lady lived in this house, the former owner. She never talked about it like this man, but she came into my room, she had like a wave of fear. I often let my shutters close because I was too lazy to open them, but she told me that evil spirits were stored in my room, which sent a chill down my spine. Now I live in an apartment with my partner, 21 years old, and I wasn't finished. I hear a voice from time to time which gives me short sentences. I was getting out of the shower when I heard, "Are you okay, darling?" I then jumped up and shouted to my partner who was downstairs if he had called me. "No, I didn't call you at all. I'm peeing in the zucchini for the evening." I'm peeling. I'm peeling the zucchini for this evening. The last time I heard a voice was when I was on the sofa in my living room listening to a felled-up video. I then heard, "Shut up." I then turn off my phone in the middle of the day and I end up shouting, "Leave me alone." And since that day, nothing more. Sometimes feel strange things, also I see black masses. I even bought books on the paranormal. I also started doing sort of cartomancy. I draw cards for my loved ones, which troubles them because I discovered things about them. So who was this man all this time? My grandfather died when I was 5. I assumed it was him. My mother confided that it was him from the beginning. My darling is not a trivial nickname. If you have any questions or ideas, tell me everything. but not about the zucchini part. That was actually my fault. The lady who watched over me while I slept as a child, and the shadow figures that scared me after she left. I was between 3 and 5 years old, so it was around 89 to 91. My room's on the complete opposite end of the house from my parents' bedroom. I'd wake up in the middle of the night on a regular basis scared. When I'd wake up, I'd remember seeing this woman standing at the end of my bed, and I could kind of see through her, but also just put off a glow. It was a warm, loving, welcoming, and peaceful glow. She was always wearing a blue tunic and a white headdress. She was always looking down, holding and happily comforting a baby wrapped in a blanket. After a few seconds of having my eyes open, she'd notice that I was awake and would act surprised like I wasn't supposed to see her. Then she'd immediately disappear. I never felt threatened by her at all. I remember the first time I saw her, I didn't know what to think, and I pulled my sheets over my head before she disappeared. She really did give off an aura that was comforting and welcoming, loving, peaceful, and happy. The glow coming off of her felt like that, like I knew I was completely safe while sleeping. This happened quite a few times, to the point I'd smile when I saw her after waking up. She'd look back with a smile that I was sort of comforting, yet at the same time conveying something like, "You aren't supposed to actually see me." That's still like intentionally letting me see her for a few seconds before fading away. She felt like a very familiar mother figure, but wasn't my mom. I was always scared right after she disappeared because that safe feeling would disappear as well. I'd want to run to my parents' bedroom. I could see my parents' bedroom from the doorway of my room, but he had to walk through the dining room and living room to get to it. There were always these strange shadow figures, and like dozens of them walking around the dining room, kitchen, and living room. I remember being so scared of them, but never actually drew their attention while I stood there watching them from my bedroom doorway. They never really noticed me or walked toward me. It seemed that they were in a hurry, like walking with busy intent, but never actually going anywhere. I was always scared of them, even more scared that I'd draw their attention. But I wanted the comfort of my parents. I was too scared to run through the shadow people that they were walking around, so I'd scream for my parents from my bedroom doorway. The instant I'd scream, the shadow people would stop walking, and all of them would look up at me with like an angry and frustrated aura, but never actually took a step towards me. They'd just disappear about the time I'd hear either of my parents' voices. One of the last times I saw the lady at the end of my bed, and the shadow people, wanted to get to my parents' room where they were, but instead of just calling out for them, I closed my eyes and held out my hands to feel my way across the dining room and living room to my parents' bedroom. I actually made it there on my own. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel them there before I started to disappear. But I could also feel as they were fading away that they were angry. They were angry because I wasn't scared of them anymore. I stopped seeing them shortly after that, which was around the same time I started feeling more comfortable staying in my own bed at night by myself, at least without needing my parents so close by. But it's one of the most real and vivid memories that I can remember from when I was that age, and I'm 38 now. I still remember exactly what the lady looked and felt like, and the shadow people. This wasn't even an old house or anything you'd really associate with a stereotypical haunted place. They're a relatively new double-wide trailer that my mom and dad had put there a few years before I was born. They bought the trailer brand new. I feel like what I saw and felt had to be real, because a 3 or 5-year-old wouldn't have been able to imagine that physical feeling from her aura. That was so welcoming, understanding, and comforting, loving, and peaceful that the lady at the end of the bed gave off as she glowed. It was a distinct physical feeling that a 3 or 5-year-old wouldn't have been able to just randomly imagine. A feeling I still somehow remember. I never saw anything like that again in that place, or any other place I've lived. bed being moved by an unseen force. When I was a little girl, I can't remember why, but I could never sleep in a room on my own. I always had to be with somebody and often climbed into bed with my siblings or my mom. And to this day, I still need a nightlight of sorts. I prefer having my dogs in my bed. I don't really remember anything from where I was little, but later on in life I had some experiences that probably explains this fear of mine. This happened a few times, one being the most terrifying. I'd be half asleep and I'd feel like somebody had taken hold of my bed and had shook it. It wasn't that feeling of you're drifting off and your body jolts awake. I've experienced that numerous times. This was as if something physically yanked my back. It always made my hair stand on end and a dreaded feeling would fill my stomach. The worst occasion was when my sister and I were sleeping in the spare room in my grandmother's house, both in a single bed each. This bed was ancient, heavy metal. I was asleep, but was woken by the bed being yanked and the noise it made on the floor, evident by the bed no longer being against the wall and the scrape of the metal on the concrete. It terrified me. I had to cover the floor to the ceiling and mirror in my grandma's wardrobe as it was freaking me out and crawled into bed with my sister. After that, though, it's never been scary. I haven't felt my bed being yanked, but I often experience the feeling of somebody coming into my room. I hear a click, then I know someone's in there. I can feel them inches away from me. The air changes and the room feels more full. I've also experienced the sensation of somebody sitting on the end of my bed when I'm totally alone and no one's there. I do have a fear of mirrors, but I have none in my bedroom and I'm sleeping somewhere with one. I have it covered. I suffer with anxiety and depression my entire life and often felt haunted and terrified of demonic possession. Should I be scared of ghosts? For starters, I don't believe 100% in ghosts. I still have my doubts, but about 4 weeks ago, me and my girlfriend went to a hotel. We're about to leave and we used the elevator at the time from the 4th floor to the ground floor. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor because a hotel staff member, a beautiful young woman, joined us going down to the ground floor. She smiled and greeted us as a hotel staff member should. My girlfriend started acting weird and insisting on using the stairs instead. At first, I thought my girlfriend was jealous. But when we're on the ground floor and ask her what's wrong, she tells me she saw a lady on her back following her. She's not connected to the ground, she's like floating. Her face was blurred and she was almost about to look at her, but was just ignored when she realized quickly that she's a ghost. She also told me that ghosts sometimes follow somebody whether you like it or not. She's just scared that lady might, latched onto her and follows her everywhere. I knew my girlfriend very well. She wouldn't make this up, and I trust her that she's telling the truth since she's told me before that she can see ghosts. She also hates hospitals for some reason. I'm not trying to scare anybody, I just want to make sense out of it. I have questions like, should I fear them? And most of the time they seem chill. Other times they bother anybody if you make eye contact, and sometimes they're pure evil. Just a perspective of a person who's ignorant of this territory, you could say. I just need some answers. Keeps keeping me awake at night. Time jumping or stopping. About 15 years ago, I went to visit a cousin. Me and him hang out with some friend who live in the block. It's about 7 p.m., starting to get a bit dark. We came back to the house and we were alone waiting for his parents to return to the house. We decided to watch a movie while we waited to see if we were going to be out to eat some dinner and what was going to be on the plan. All of a sudden, I felt sleepy. And that's what happened. I felt like I slept for hours. Suddenly it was sunny again. My cousin was asleep on the sofa next to me and the movie on the TV was paused. The movie that we were watching was on a channel and he didn't have a DVR or wasn't a DVD or anything. The whole place felt like a lot of pressure, like somebody was pushing. I could barely move. I stand and walk to the bathroom really slow, like something was pushing me back. I pee, washed my hands and my face, and I came out of the restroom. All of a sudden, it was dark. My cousin and uncles were in the kitchen table. I was freaking out, and I never understood what the hell happened. It felt so uncanny, and every time I remembered it was just like I get anxious. Has anyone experienced something like this? What made you start to believe that there might be something more? For me, I was 14. I was having one of the worst nights of my entire life. I was having a particularly brutal episode of harm OCD. I was considering SH just to stop the thoughts. In desperation, I looked up some Bible verses. I was never religious, but I knew religion brought comfort to many, so I gave it a shot. I read a verse, and I don't really remember which one, but it was something about how God's always with you. Instantly after reading that, I felt this absolute euphoria that lasted 10 or 20 minutes. It shocked me, to say the least. I later read more verses in the following days, but the more I learned about Christianity specifically, the more I read the Bible, the less I believed in it. Not that I was a believer anyway, the more I started to dislike the Christian God. All I know is that it felt as if something was protecting me that night. I know many skeptics will claim that it was just cope, but it may have been, but if it was, why didn't I ever have it happen again when I had episodes that were measurably worse, like having panic attacks, and why would this type of thing occur much more often in moments of high stress and other non-religiously? If high stress is the only barrier, why doesn't it happen nearly every time? Some of my experiences. Possible demonic entities. At the age of 12, summer had just begun. I saw a shadow in the top corner of my room. I didn't think much of it, but it seemed to me as if the shadow moved extremely quickly from my room, headed toward my sister's room. I freaked, went to go listen at the door, but didn't hear anything from her, just muffled masculine voices. I honestly can't remember if I knocked on her door or not, but I do remember that I was scared shitless. Still went back to my room, just sort of taking out my both, went to my bed, and I went back into the wall, just walked toward my sister's door and didn't get a response this time. I go to my mom and I tell her I can't get my sister to respond and her door's locked. My mom goes and just unlocks her door with her nail. Wow. Our locks can be unlocked from the outside with the twist of a nail in a little space in the center. My sister was totally fine. She had her lights off, TV on, and headphones in. Feeling kind of silly, I go and put my bow back in its bag and under my bed again. Sometime later, I couldn't tell you if it was days or weeks, but this is 6 years ago now, and my memory's a bit fuzzy. I had a nightmare with some sort of demonic figure. In the dream, I wake up, go from my bed to the light switch for the hall outside my room, and I'm like flicking on and off, like this entity's getting closer and closer each time I flick the light off, like some fucking movie shit. That's until it's right in my face. I can't describe its face very well, only that it was bald, ghostly pale, and had very dark, gaunt eyes, and sort of matured features like some wrinkles and an absolutely chilling gaze. Almost kind of like Quan Chi, but much older looking and less sharp features. The only thing I remember hearing was, "Your dog is next." And with that, I wake up scared. I had 4 dogs at the time, the oldest of which was Rascal, who's 12, which is on the lower end of the average lifespan for his breed, and he wasn't having health issues at this point, so I chalked it up to just some nightmare. Within the next 2 weeks, I let my dogs all in from being outside, going to give them treats, and sort of Rascal runs to his usual spot, and suddenly he gets a 1,000-yard kind of stare and just flops over. I panic, yell for my parents to come downstairs. Rascal's alive at this point, but he's clearly very off, and he won't drink water, and he didn't eat his treat, and he just seemed weak. Drive to the animal hospital at like 8 or 10 p.m., I think, but they're able to resuscitate him, but he isn't stable, and within minutes his heart stops again. Repeat the process a few times, and eventually we knew that there was just no saving him, he was dead. We're all devastated. I didn't mention the dream to my mom until much later. Then over a period of the next 2 years, so from 12 to 14, I have at least 2 other similar encounters with this figure or something similar. Never got a great look at its face again, but in both scenarios the dream ends with my own death. One, we were just in some unnamed room and it kills me. Oddly enough, when I woke up to this time, I just got pissed, so I tried to go back to sleep. I go back to sleep and suddenly I'm right back where I was, and the entity is extremely surprised and almost frightened to see me alive. Within moments, I defeated it. The next encounter is in the middle school. The dream was a school shooting, and there was this figure that was extremely tall, like 7 or 8 feet tall, and it was extremely fast. It was wearing a trench coat and a fedora, had a shotgun, and its speed-walking pace was just a tiny bit slower than your average adult male sprinting. I'd already killed several members of my classmates, and I vividly remember seeing my old crush dead on the floor. No longer been interested for months, but random. Luckily, I was kind of quick as a kid, and I ran into my science classroom, and this figure enters the room, shoots me, and again I die and instantly wake up. I remembered how I was able to go back into my dream the other time, so I did, same story. I defeated or killed it, but I killed it again. They say this is somebody who's very skeptical of all paranormal phenomena. I have no idea what this was, and whenever I tell the story, it's the 4th time telling this, I feel ridiculous. Something in me remembers it so vividly. It all just feels so real. I think a lot of you guys and gals in this sub can relate. Thanks for being here. See ya.